Okay guys, what my original plan was, in order to use this 4-tire inflation system, I have it all laid out there. I have the quick connect right there, right? And my plan was to cut this hose all the way at the end here by this Schrader valve adapter here. I was going to cut it right here, put a couple quick connects, and that way I could disconnect this piece and then connect this piece directly to that quick connect there. Okay, but then if I still wanted to use this individually and screw it on a Schrader valve somehow, I could take that piece, plug it back in here, and then use this piece. But this is going to add a lot of hose that I don't need in order to use the 4-tire inflation system. And this is smaller hose too, at least the outer diameter is. We're going to cut them and see what they're like on the inside. But this is the pigtail coming off the Maxi Trac. Sorry, I've forgotten the name already. Maxi Trac compressor. And this looks smaller on the outside. So we're going to cut them, see what the inside diameters are like. And my plan is to just go ahead and put quick connectors here and here. That way I can still use this hose separately, or I can connect this directly to that right there. All right, it always makes me nervous chopping stuff, but we're going to give it a little space here in case we want to put a splitter. And yeah, looks pretty small. Let's cut this one here as well. And that's definitely a bigger diameter there. Okay, so I think we're making the right decision here. Okay, so I've used these in the 4-way tire inflator hose setup. I'm going to try these PEX clamps, or these shark bite clamps. Maybe there's other names for them. I call them PEX clamps. For PEX tubing, if you do your own plumbing, you know what this is. And I'm going to try this and see if we can't use this because it's a little bit lower profile than that nut. Now, there is a way to get it apart with a screwdriver. I usually just cut them with a little cutoff wheel. But if I do have to make a trail repair, I'm probably going to cut this section off anyway. I can destroy that with a screwdriver and put a regular hose clamp back on if I want to. Now that's the advantage of using regular hose clamps, is you just need something to turn it with a screwdriver, right? And you can loosen it or tighten it, or if you get an air leak, you can, or if you need to replace a piece that went bad, you just unscrew it, put it back on. I'm going to go ahead and use this though, just because it's lower profile, and let's see how it goes. And of course, a little soap water makes a big difference in getting this on. This is super tight in this Maxi Trac hose here. Okay, so that worked well. And this is the special crimper tool. Now, some people do use kind of pinching shear on these, and it seems to work. I've never used that. Let's see if this is going to work here. Okay, so that's definitely squishing the hose nice and tight. A little bit of a ridge there. We're going to put a little heat shrink on just to do it. And this, of course, won't probably shrink down around the 3/8 hose in the back here, but that's okay if it's a little loose. I really just want to protect the protect my hands from the metal right there. So this heat shrink is from a Harbor Freight kit, and I don't have the part number, but this is some wide stuff. It's saying it's 1 inch. But it sure shrunk down pretty much around the tubing. Made it look pretty good, yeah? Good deal. Now, I found these at Ace Hardware. This is a 1/4 inch plug, they call it, but it has a quick connect there and a barb fitting 1/4 inch there. And I thought that would just be easier than putting something together. It was, I don't remember how much it was. It was $3 or $4, I think. Now, just so you can see what I'm doing here, these are 1/2 inch PEX clamps or shark bite clamps that I used on the 3/8 hose. On this 1/4 inch hose, I think these 3/8 are going to work. Okay, let's try it out. So we put some soap water on here just to lube it up. Okay, this might be a little bit tighter fit, but I think it'll still work. Yep, looks pretty good. Let's get some heat shrink on there. And let's not go too far on. Okay, for this 3/8 hose that comes off the compressor, we used 3/8 hose barb. We used the 1/2-inch shark bite clamps, and then we used 1-inch heat shrink. Okay, for the 1/4-inch hose, we used a 1/4-inch hose barb. We used 3/8 inch shark bite clamps, and we used 3/4-inch, there it is, heat shrink. Seems to be a good fit. It's nice and smooth, doesn't catch on anything. Should keep it cleaner inside there. If you drag it through the dirt, it shouldn't collect dirt or mud. And let's see here. Seems to work. Okay guys, look, I want to let you know about something. One of my mods didn't work for this Maxi Trac, and I want to tell you about it real quick. So I thought I had a great idea that I was going to wire my Maxi Trac just like I wired my Viair. So this Viair, I had wired on this little connector, and that way I could quick connect to my Jeep right here. So this connector is rated at 50 amps, and I ran 8-gauge wire that goes from there to the batteries. It's only about 4 or 5 feet. And so this Viair runs great on this. You know, this is the cord that came with it. I cut off the clamps, I put this on, and this is rated for 50 amps. The Viair, I know this is upside down, but it only pulls 23 amps, okay? It's 100% duty cycle, but it, I don't know if we can read it from here. Here we go. 100% duty cycle, but 23 amps, okay? And it's obviously not flowing as much air as the Maxi Trac. That's a given. But this connector works fine for this Viair. And so I thought I'd do the same thing to the Maxi Trac. So I bought some more of these, and I cut off the clamps of the Maxi Trac, and I soldered these in, and I clamped them on, and connected it. And I was doing a 4-tire test again, running the Maxi Trac, airing up all 4 of the 37s. And I was doing a test from flat to 32 psi, and it run for about 7 minutes. And I thought, I'm just going to check here. And I put my hand on the wire that went to the Maxi Trac, and it was super, super hot. And I put my hand on the connections. I thought, oh, I forgot about this. These are 50 amp connectors, and this thing's pulling 90 amps. This Maxi Trac pulls 90 amps. And I thought, I'm going to ruin the motor. So I shut it off, felt the clamps. The clamps weren't hot at all. I don't understand that, because I thought that was the limiting factor. But the wires were super, super hot. So I like shut it off, and I ran and got my non-contact thermometer, and I checked the cylinders. If you watch my other videos on this compressor, you know, I filled up the tires from 12 to 32 psi in like 4.5 minutes, and it was 138 degrees, I think. 138. They're both below 140. And so when I checked it this time, it was at 180. They were both at 180, and they were way too, I mean, they were frying hot. They were way too hot to touch. So I realized that that was probably a mistake, trying to lengthen the wire, and whether it was the connector that I was using or just the longer wire, I went back to the clamps, and you can see I resoldered the clamps back on. And let's just look at this closely here. Reclamp, I used the other side, so this side I ended up just cutting off. So I reclamped them on this other side and soldered them in nice and solid. And then I ran it again for another 5 minutes, and it ran fine. The wires never got hot. And so I mean, I was thinking about remote mounting this in the back of my Jeep off this battery. I'm not doing that now. No, I don't think it's worth it. You know, I want to do that, of course, but I don't think it's worth risking the motor. I want this thing to last. I want it to do a good job. You know, 4.5 minutes to air up my tires is awesome. And compared to 20 minutes is what we just tested this on. 20 minutes solid to do the same thing this did in 4.5 minutes. And look at them. I mean, the cylinders are they look like they're twice as big. It's moving, you know, a whole lot more air. It's pulling a lot more amps too, and that's why we had to be careful. So my recommendation is just don't mess with the wiring. Leave it the way it is. And you know, lift the hood. I wouldn't remote mount it unless you can do it super short. here. Okay, now I don't want to run the compressor without some air coming out because I don't want it to deadhead. A lot of you will say, don't ever blow out a filter because it can blow dirt through the filter into the, where you don't want the dirt, right? Because you don't want to blow the dirt through the filter. But you can see I'm just blowing the dust off it. I'm not holding it real close. This thing is pretty powerful, but you can still see a big layer of dirt there in the creases. So I do like to just dust these off lightly like that, just so they maintain better airflow. And I do that to the vacuum cleaner filters and all those, and they seem to last a long time then. Got to be real careful with the HEPA filter on the vacuum cleaner though, because you just really want to just lightly blow the dust off the outside of it. You definitely don't want to damage that. Okay, so it kind of works as a compressor, you know, to run a little blowgun. And I have about a 50-foot hose here or so. And so it's a 3/8 hose. It's pushing air through all that. This is a pretty small orifice though, so it is able to build a lot of pressure there. This is just a few dollar blowgun I picked up at Harbor Freight just to have an extra one. And so, you know, I don't want to run it particularly with this closed. I don't know if it'll stop if it reaches a maximum pressure. I assume it would, but I just don't want to deadhead it, or deadhead it as little as possible. Now, do I want to carry a compressor hose with me in the Jeep also? I don't think so. Okay, I could have predicted that this would happen. So we're just going to plug in these air tools and see what it does. I'm pretty sure it's not going to run them all adequately, like pull a lug nut off or anything, but hey, we're just going to put it through its paces and see what happens here. Little angle die grinder first. Okay. How about the 3/8 drill? Okay. Didn't do that real well. How about the little butterfly, 3/8 butterfly? The almighty air ratchet. Can't hold it still. Can't hold it still. Okay. We all know what's going to happen here. Okay, go ahead and say it. Bro, you're taking this too far. Let's put this on reverse. Oh. Okay, that was kind of a joke, right? But I was almost 99% sure it wouldn't pull the lug nut off, but when it started making noise, I was like, oh, it just might do it. Nah, didn't do it. That's okay. Okay, so one of the connections that can fail, obviously, is this connection to the actual clamp. So we'll just slide this back and check it out. Now look, they did solder it, and you know, that's pretty good. It's not much solder though, and I think I'm gonna pull these open here, cut this insulation back, solder all this down, and then crimp these down on top of the soldered wire and make sure that's all soldered all the way throughout there so we get really good contact. And that will never be an issue in the future ever again. Now that one's actually soldered pretty well. Look at that. It's got a lot of solder tied in at the top there. You know, soldering's not welding, of course. You don't get penetration, but you do want to have adequate contact. And this one just doesn't look that great to me. It's definitely filled the wire. But, you know, it's just, there's just not a lot of solder contacting. It doesn't look like. There's probably is underneath. That's a guess. I'm going to go ahead and loosen this one. I'll probably go ahead and do the other one as well. So we trimmed the sheath back. Now we're just going to fold this over. Okay, so these clamps are working good. These things keep sliding off though, so I'm trying to figure out a way to put them on. I ended up using a rivet right there, and basically they all have this little hole here, and that's kind of a big rivet. Fits right in there. It's aluminum, of course. Just have to kind of find the hole where it is, punch that through, and punch this in through. We'll put the rivet gun on it here. Hi-ya! Okay, nice and smooth. Doesn't want to pull out. Keeps the cover on there. Good. Better. So I don't know what the torque spec is supposed to be on these. I'm just making sure none of them are like loose. If you're losing pressure out the side of your cylinder head, you're losing pressure. All right, one of the commenters, Brent Ellis. Hey, thanks Brent for your comment. He mentioned to make sure to take these off and look inside for any trash. And he had heard that recommendation and found some like casting flash or something on his, he said. And so you just unscrew these air cleaner covers. There's one filter. There's also a kind of a base filter in here as well that sits on the bottom. And, you know, I looked around inside. I even took both of these off, turned upside and, you know, banged it on the counter a few times. I didn't see anything come out. And I looked around inside real good with the light. I can't see anything inside of mine. It looks all clean in here. Of course, you don't want any of that going down inside there, obviously. So that's a good thing to check before you even run it the first time. And so thank you, Brent, for that recommendation. Okay, just in case I didn't say this before, this is a great idea, I think. I love this because I can connect it to any air hose or whatever. But it's also a bad idea because you don't want to turn it on and run the compressor against this. This is a closed connector here unless you plug something into it. So it'll deadhead against this, which is really bad for this compressor because this compressor does not have a pressure switch on it. So it will not cut off. So people are adding pressure switches on these. And I'll tell you, I was thinking about doing that, but my mechanic buddies were both telling me that, you know, don't do that because that's not a good idea for this compressor. And the reason it isn't a good idea, as they explained it to me, was even though that's a pressure switch, and let's say it turns on at 90 and cuts off at 140, and then it drops below 90 and the compressor kicks on again, that's a lot of pressure for this compressor to start against. Okay, so the startup pressure is very high. And so you know, if you're filling your low pressure tires on your Jeep or whatever, and you're at 10 pounds and you're going to 30 pounds, that's not a lot of stress against it, but you're starting at a low pressure and airing it up. That's probably the best scenario for this kind of compressor. Now, if you do have a pressure limiting valve on it, but it does not have an unloader valve, that's where the problem arises. So the unloader valve will actually unload the line so that as the compressor kicks on, it can build up RPM and speed before it starts adding pressure to the tank. So that's why I decided to not put a pressure limiting switch on this. But I'm going to have to be fully cognizant of this right here, because I put this on here, I'm going to have to be careful. Now, if I put my blowgun on it, I'm going to want to make sure I don't start it unless this is pulled. So I might even just put like a big rubber band around this, like a Ranger band or something around this, just to hold it open all the time, because this is going to live with my compressor. Okay, so if you watched my video on the DIY Harbor Freight Challenge 4-tire inflator, you'll recognize this. So this worked really well. You could shut off the pressure there. You could check the tire pressure here, but I had to shut my compressor off when I did that. Okay, otherwise this Maxi Trac compressor will deadhead against this. You don't want that. So I would have to shut the compressor off, turn the valve, check my pressure, and also I'd have to hit this button to bleed the air off to equalize it. And we're going to fix that as well. So I'm going to show you how to fix that so you don't have to do that. And then when I'd resume inflation, I'd turn the valve like that, turn the compressor back on. So it's a bunch of steps. We're going to get rid of some of those steps. Now, this was my buddy's suggestion, my mechanic buddy, and he suggested I just get a 3-way valve. This is what I bought off Amazon. I think it was 15 bucks. It's a full port valve. So you can see, hopefully down there, the port it's a 1/4 inch the whole way through. That is full port. That's what you want. Obviously, there's some strictures otherwise in here, but the least that you have of those, the better. Now, this valve is super heavy. It's very substantial. But what I worried about was that I would just be able to rotate this 180 degrees. I didn't know I could rotate it 360 degrees, which is awesome because these arrows are all open, open, open that way, right? So I can open all 3 ports that way. I can shut off that port. I can shut off that port. I can shut off that port and just have air flow straight through. So I have any option that I want, okay? So right now it's full port. You can see it all the way through there, and it's open there. You can see it's open right there. But as I rotate this around 180 degrees, it'll shut it off here. And then you can see, hopefully you can see inside there, there's the ball. Okay, so this is pretty dang heavy, but this will give me the options to be able to direct air wherever I want it. Valve off here, okay? I've already wrapped that in Teflon tape. We're going to take this one and connect this to here. Okay, so that's what that looks like. Then we're going to connect this to here. So this is 1/4 inch NPT on all 3 sides. Okay, I disconnected it from the Jeep. Now we're just going to unscrew this. This is not a tight connection. I just loosened it with pliers here. Okay, now what's important here is this little diaphragm. This little diaphragm sits right here. Has a spring that rides against it. And that spring, what it does is it keeps this diaphragm, if air tries to go back out of the gauge, back into the tires or back that way for whatever reason because you disconnected it, this will hold the pressure. Okay, so when you check your tire and your pressure on your tires, you put the gauge on, it goes psst, and you can take it off and you can look at your gauge and it'll hold the pressure. That's what this little thing does. It just holds the pressure so you can read it even though this might not be connected to your tire anymore. And then to pop the pressure off, right, you just hit the button and psst, it goes back down to 0. We're just going to get rid of that. Now, whatever pressure is going into here is going to show up there. So when my Maxi Trac kicks on, the pressure is going to go way up. Now, one of the limitations of this gauge, you wouldn't want to use this for your diesel pickup or your RV because that pressure is going to go way past what this gauge limitation is, right? This is just for off-roading where we're running 10 pounds, 8 pounds, 10 pounds, 12 pounds, up to 30 pounds, maybe 32 or 34 to drive home. that's it. That's as high as this is ever going to go. The Maxi Trac, you can see, runs it up over here when it's connected to the Jeep tire. It runs it up to a high pressure, but that's when it's basically reaching 30 psi in the Jeep. So let's see how this looks. I'll go attach it to the Jeep now, and we'll run the Maxi Trac and see what it looks like. Okay, so now that we have this rubber valve out, when you push this button, all it does is just drain pressure from the Jeep tires. So right now it's showing, 32 psi basically. We're going to go ahead and turn the compressor on, and we want to make sure the valve is straight here so the air can go straight through here to the Jeep tires. And then we're going to shut the valve to where this Maxi Trac pumps to the atmosphere, okay? And then we can see what the tire pressure is in our Jeep tires. Okay, here we go. Okay, so see how that keeps it from deadheading? And that's awesome. It's showing the pressure whenever I turn the valve. Tells me exactly what my pressure is without having to push this button, without having to turn the compressor off. So that's really nice. That's a really, really good idea. And let's say the pressure is too much now. Let's which I don't want 35 pounds in this tire. I'm only have 32 in all the others. So let's just turn the valve now. Okay, it's still connected to the Maxi Trac, but the pressure is going to drop, right? And we're going to run it down and down and down and down, and let's just see what the pressure is now. Okay, closer to 32 there. Now, in case you're wondering, I have not been able to find one of these at Harbor Freight. So this is beyond the Harbor Freight challenge, but it is a modification that I want based on this compressor that I have, and it's going to work well, I think. There's no restriction in here. I'll be able to point it out any direction that I want, and it'll do exactly what I need it to do. It is a little heavy. I mean, it has some substantial weight, but it'll probably never ever break on me. It'll probably last me my whole life, which is awesome. Going to check a couple things inside of here just to make sure there's nothing in the wiring that from the factory that we need to address that might be a potential short hazard or something like that. Okay, so there's 6 screws to pull out. There's one here, these same screws on the back side here and here. There's 2 screws in here. We're just using a number 1 here. Okay, I've taken apart not a lot of these compressors, but most of the compressors I've had in the past, because I bought cheap ones from like Harbor Freight and whatever, just to check the wiring. And I've had 2 compressors on me where they've like quit working, and all it was a kind of a crappy soldering connection that came apart, and I resoldered it and it kept working fine. So that's all I'm taking it apart here for. And the solder joints look really solid. This is thick wire here where the ground comes in, and where you want to look is anywhere there might be a clamp, just to make sure that it hasn't busted through there's a clamp right back here. You'll be able to see, just to make sure it hasn't busted through the insulation. The shrink wrap, this is probably a connection right here. This connection, look at that, dude. See that? I don't know if that's residual wire right there, but that piece right there, that's sticking through. Okay, that's kind of crappy work right there. Could that short out on this? Yes, and I'm not happy with that. So I'm going to go through, I can't heat shrink this again, but I can wrap it up in electrical tape really well. So what is that? I mean, that's so obviously when you put heat shrink on, it gets very soft, right? Because the idea is to shrink it down, and it gets very soft because it's hot and it shrinks down, and that wire can bust through real easy. So that's a little bit of a kind of a, when you're soldering your connections, you don't want these pieces of wire sticking out. And that's a reason whenever I do my connections like this, not only will I heat shrink them, almost always, I'll wrap them in electrical tape as well, because you don't want that happening. See that wire there? That could short this out. And yeah, could damage components or ruin my motor. So we're going to fix that. This circuit board looks like it's well protected. The switch connections look good. Probably a little hard to see from there. And so let's fix that and get it back together. And I just noticed this too. There's a piece of copper wire sticking out right there. See that? So that's probably not going to hit anything to short out, but still, that's getting cut off. I'm going to cut this one off too, as best I can. Now, the bottom line is, you know, is it going to hold up? Is it going to last forever? I don't know. Maybe. Is any compressor going to last forever? I mean, you hear stories about having to send even the expensive ones back sometimes. Is there a higher failure rate with the cheaper compressor? Probably. Is the benefit of this compressor being so fast worth carrying? To me, it is. If I can get, man, a few years out of this, I'd be so happy. I am going to carry a backup compressor probably with me if I'm going by myself. If I'm going with my buddies, I'd probably just rely on one of theirs. Am I happy with it overall so far? I think, you know, if we develop sort of a community of keeping in touch with each other, there's several people making videos on this compressor right now and of modifications they're making. And some, you know, I'm going to be cautious about, but others I'm like, yeah, that's pretty cool. There's not a lot of mods you can make to this to make it better. I thought about, man, I could drill some little ports here on the side outside the air filter so it'll still suck air through the air filter and maybe get a little bit more airflow so its air intake would be open a little more. Maybe I'll do that. That sounds kind of redneck, but I might do that. But this community, you know, watch people's videos, you know, let's try to support each other. This is a cool compressor. For the price, there's nothing like it out there. And if you're having problems with yours and you find a solution for it, you know, please post it. And, you know, we'll run that to the top of the comments chain, because that's what people, YouTube's a community, right? That's what I love about YouTube. It makes people neighbors that couldn't be neighbors otherwise. I can go to Dave Knows How, you know, off wherever he lives and learn about tractors from him. I can go to Wrangler Star or wherever and learn about off-grid survival with him. And so YouTube is just, it makes us all neighbors, and that's what I love about it. And so let's treat this the same way. In fact, if you've looked for this high volume compressor on YouTube and you start searching them, YouTube starts feeding you similar videos. This compressor has been manufactured, has been sold, I should say, under several other brand names, including Morflate, including, now I can't remember the other ones. There's one in Australia. There's a couple that have been sold here in the US. Off-road, I can't remember what the other name is. I'll put it in the description here. And several of them sold them. They sell them out. I don't know if they're lasting or if they're not lasting, but we're going to find out. My hope is that if something does go wrong with it, I want to find a solution that'll help everybody. Okay, so stay tuned. Be sure to subscribe and click notifications, so if anything does come up on this compressor in the future, I'll let you know. And I'd appreciate you doing the same thing for me. If you find out anything with yours, please let me know. Please let the community here know. Comment on the comment section on my video or somebody else's video. And you know, if there's an easy solution to fix the problem that might arise with these, let's find out what it is so that everybody can benefit from it. Cool. Thanks for watching.